All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of our attendees, and thank you for joining us for this webinar presented by Folk Alliance International. A few things we need to cover before we get started today. When you opened the webinar, a control panel appeared on the screen. The link to access closed captioning is in the chat box. It's also in a handout, which you're able to access in the handout part of your control panel. To submit your questions for consideration, you'll want to use the question box in the control panel. We are answering, for the most part today, questions that were submitted in advance of today's webinar, but there will be a section for a live Q&A at the end of today's webinar, around the 45-minute mark. You're welcome to drop your questions in at any time. A recording and a transcript of this webinar will be available most likely tomorrow, and links to those will be sent to all attendees and folks who were not able to attend today. So fret not, it's coming your way. When you close the webinar today, a short survey will appear, and we greatly appreciate any and all feedback you can give us in order to help us deliver more and better webinars for what people are looking for. Okay, so let's begin today. That was a little awkwardly said, but there you go. Let's begin with a little poll. So our first poll for today is, what is your industry role? And we'll just give folks a quick second to answer that so we can see who's in the rooms today. It'll give us a little breakdown. And Jared, the person behind the scenes, will post the results of that. Great. So we have just a couple of artists and mostly folks who are peers of our panelists. Fabulous. And let's take a peek. Our second poll today right away is, where are you joining us from? I will say, I will send out apologies to folks from both North and South America for lumping those two continents together, but GoToWebinar only gave me 5 possible options. So let's take a peek in a moment. Okay, North and South America. Who knows if it's half of one and half of the other, but fabulous. Okay, well, without any further ado, it is my distinct and great pleasure to introduce to you today's moderator. She is the coordinator and curator of Folk Alliance International's The Exchange. She is a well-known and well-respected artist manager, and she is my pal. Please welcome Sheena Keen.
Thank you. Thanks, Tressa. As you see, we have Sam Lee, who you'll meet later in the webinar, joining us from a forest. We wouldn't want him to join us from anywhere else. And we've Glenn, who is going to talk first from Australia, Carolina from Colombia, and Jen from Montreal. So it's a gorgeous panel today. And I'm going to start by introducing Glenn Dickie, who a lot of people who travel to the music conference year in, year out, which we know all maybe bar Folk Alliance have been cancelled this year so far. Glenn is the music export officer and does an awesome job both at home in Australia and abroad. So I'd like to introduce Jen to start off just talking about what the Australian industry response is internally, and then to talk a little bit further about what the conversation is currently about Australian showcasing artists that we're ready to export, moving on from this moment in time. Okay, Glenn?
Right on. Oh, I thought you were going to ask me questions, so I'm just going to go straight into it. Good evening to all to the 14% of the world that is from Australia and New Zealand joining us, and the rest of you from who are getting up. Good morning. Oh, look, that's weird seeing my face there. Well, I guess we're pretty lucky here in Australia and New Zealand at the moment. I guess this is our tyranny of distance that has been the pain in our bums in terms of getting to the rest of the world to be able to export our music. It's come in quite handy when trying to maintain the spread of a virus. We don't have as many cases, and New Zealand is almost to the point of not having any cases, it seems. So that's a good thing, and we certainly do feel for all of the other countries and cities who are going through a really, really rough time, and also obviously all of our musicians and artistic friends and our event organisers and all of the people that work underneath that, who are having a pretty shit time at the moment, going from a wage to no wage in about 12 hours. So it's all very weird and complicated. There are some silver linings, obviously, from all of this. And in terms of the stuff that's been going on in Australia, Sounds Australia, Millie, who was my boss, the executive producer of Sounds Australia, has been very heavily involved in the government advocacy. There's been a support network that has been set up, that was set up relatively quickly, in terms of trying to just have a conversation that was going on that was able to feed information into the government about the loss of work and the economic impact. That certainly from Australia's point of view, and it seems to be from a global point of view, has been the most serious, and the thing that needed the most attention up front was making sure that governments who don't necessarily understand the arts and the arts implications and how many people are out of jobs, and the fact that artists tend to also have their secondary income coming from the bars and clubs and venues that are also shutting down. So making sure that the government had a clear message that was coming from a collective of people working within the arts and events, that they were able to kind of, yeah, the clear message was going to the government about what we thought was going to be necessary. And Sheena, feel free to jump in with questions at any time to make sure that I'm on path and not talking too much.
Yeah, no, totally. So like I was saying before everybody joined, Support Act, which I'd love you to talk a little bit about, pre-existed this COVID crisis. And looking from afar, I think the fact that that was already in existence in Australia was an unbelievable jumping off point for a crisis, because it covered not only the musicians, but also crew members, managers, agents, it covered the whole industry. If you could talk a little bit to Support Act, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, so Support Act is an organisation that was created to. It was kind of originally created to help a lot of those old, like the crew members and stuff like that, who might have lost their jobs or got injured, and that couldn't support themselves. You know, workers who may not have had superannuation or healthcare or things like that. And I should back this up just by saying Australia's got a pretty good healthcare system, but there's a lot of people who can still slip through the cracks a bit. It has evolved quite extensively, and it has become, I guess, one of the things that's galvanised the Australian music industry as the place where Australian musicians and people who work within events and the arts can go for relief, be it financial relief. The main thing it has been set up for, though, is for the mental health and a hotline. I'm sure every country has kind of got their kind of Beyond Blues or whatever it might be, which is a mental health hotline that you can call up. So there's a dedicated hotline as part of Support Act that you can call if you're working within the arts industry or you're a musician, to kind of talk to somebody about if you're having problems. Obviously, there's a very high suicide rates within, especially within crew within the music industry. So that's been the thing that has definitely been, people have been raising a lot of money for. The government injected another $10 million into Support Act just recently, which was fantastic to see. And then a lot of the showcases and stuff like that have also been raising money for Support Act. But it has been in place for many years, and now it has really kind of come into its own and been so super important in terms of being able to be there for those people who have needed. And then in New Zealand has also got Music Helps as well.
Right, okay. Actually, I didn't know about that. And for Support Act then, is Isolate, which I want you to also talk a little bit about that, any funds raised for Isolate goes to Support Act too, right now?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So Isolate, for those of you who don't know Isolate, which is probably most of those who aren't in that 14% that are on this right now from Australia and New Zealand. Isolate is a streaming festival which is on Instagram each week. 73 artists play on Saturday and Sundays, which has been going on for now. This will be the 6th week coming up. Which was put originally, the concept was via one of the artists and Emily Allman, who was a musician herself and also a venue booker, and now it's kind of turned into this really amazing event, showcase event. You know, it's a great showcase event of Australian talent and a little smattering of international talent as well. But most of the events that have been happening here, nearly, I'd say 90% for now, the streaming events that have kind of popped up everywhere, most of those have gone towards Support Act. That's what I mean by the galvanisation around that kind of thing. The conversation is obviously turning now about how do we monetize and get some money into the artists' pockets. But for the first 3 weeks, and we're into kind of week 5 now, I guess, or I'm into week 5 because I've been at my parents' house for 5 weeks and 4 banana breads. But it's definitely over that 5-week period. Most of the money that's been supported and has gone into Support Act and initiatives like that.
And then just on the showcasing element, I know when we last spoke, it was literally just, we were still down in Australia and this was just beginning. There was an idea.
We were joking, we were making jokes about, South by's not going to cancel, it's going to be fine. It's just pretty much a common cold that seems a little bit more serious. Look at us now, weren't we a bit silly?
Yeah, it does. You were saying, well, there was an idea at the time because obviously we could only imagine it was only going to be for another month or so or whatever it was at the time, that the South by Southwest Australian artists, you were going to try and mount a showcase for the gang that was due to go down, and then obviously as it progressed, that wasn't possible because of having a crowd in Sydney or wherever you were going to mount it. What can you talk to what initiatives, as from the export office end, that you guys are talking about for your Australian artists that are ready to export or were ready to export for the 2020 year?
Well, it's all different now, isn't it? I mean, we went from, all right, South by's cancelled, we should look at doing something with some of the South by acts. We created an event very quickly called 3 for the Stream, where we were going to give each of the acts that could make it down to Melbourne 3 songs that they could perform at Bakehouse Studios, and we would stream that. Every day that changed, and by the time Tuesday had come along, we started planning it on the Friday, and by the time Tuesday had come along, we were pretty much in a position where we couldn't guarantee the safety of anybody going into that venue, so we had to pull the plug on it, which is why I'm still in Melbourne, because I flew down for that and I've just stayed here. But in terms of the initiatives that are happening now, I mean, Isolate is one of it, but what we're doing now is, and we are set up very differently to some of the other export offices that fund artists to go and travel and all that kind of stuff. We are sitting, we're kind of stopping and listening and watching and seeing what's happened. We're not trying to quickly reinvent the wheel, and I think it's important for us to be able to see what's happening, understand, and have a lot of phone calls with people and see how people are feeling and what people need. I think there's a lot of people that have the ability to be doing things very, very quickly. Isolate was pulled up very quickly. There's been a bunch of other things that have showcase events that are happening. There's a webinar every 10 minutes, it seems, these days. I don't think we don't think that we've necessarily needed to jam our way into that space. I don't know that that's going to be the best way. So, I mean, we're following that kind of, you know, what is it, the CAR syndrome, like a crisis, adaptation and creation and recovery. Recovery is going to be the part where we're really going to have to step in at the end when people are needing the proper tracks and stuff to be able to export. But we have no idea what export is now. Like, it's all different. Any conversation that we had at the exchange is pretty much on its head right now. So that's why we're not trying to rush into anything, because it changes so quickly. It's better we feel it's better to just stop, listen, and converse with people, advocate to the government, making sure that things are in place, that when the wheels start turning again, we're in a position that we can support our artists and our industry in the right way. So a lot of it now is just about supporting local and helping the venues get open, because without any venues here, we don't have anything to export.
I hear you. Okay, great, brilliant. And there's going to be more Q&As at the end, so we'll come back around. Carolina Rounds-China, I would love to hear from you in relation to how it has been for your own event in Colombia, but also in general, how the industry, the music industry, is responding for both artists and industry members down there.
Well, good morning to everybody. We're saying hello from Colombia, a small town called Honda. This is where I live. And in our country, in our country and in our region, we started the quarantine around the middle of March. And since then, everything has changed for us. Our life has changed. Festivals are canceled, theaters are closed, venues can't program anymore. For example, in Colombia, two of our biggest festivals, Stereo Picnic and Jamming Festival, was moved to December. It's supposed to happen in April, but they postponed it to December. But still, for us, is uncertain because we don't know what will happen during these months. As we started the quarantine really early, we've been now for more than 40 days in quarantine. So we're still not on the highest contaminated people, if you can say that, with the virus. So we guess for the end of May and the beginning of June, we will have a little bit more of what is going to happen, but still is uncertain for us and of course for all the industry. I guess the situation around the pandemic has been similar in every country in terms of how we have changed the way of living and how almost every company, theater, shops are closed. But this crisis has definitely woken up a huge need here in Colombia and in South America of making culture a good of first necessity, to give access of every human right, and in this way to guarantee the survival of every artist. Recently, in some of the lectures, I found a study from the World Health Organization when they were confirming that the emotions and our body have been telling us for a long time, and is that, for example, listening to music helps to control level of glucose in the blood, producing music improves the immune system and the stress management, and dancing is beneficial for your body and your mind, and painting can help with depression. So the Health Organization has established that culture has seriously benefits in health and recommends for the first time to prescribe these activities to deal with some disease and problems. But still, no country or government in South America gives the importance that needed to art and culture, despite that almost in this kind of past the universe has come through. Almost every people has used different cultural contents to go through these days: music, reading, dancing, cooking, you know, all around the arts. But very few artists are getting money as a result of that. And in Colombia, this pandemic has exposed the almost non-social security for the art workers, very few possibilities of financial resources, and a lack of association of the sector. The financial point of view, the government in Colombia, I can give you one example that is quite sad for me, is that they just recently made a declaration to support artists for subsistence during 3 months, beginning on March, April, and May. And they will give, the government will give $60 per month to each of them, but it will depend on a database that our little towns will give of these artists. So not all of them will be attended. You know, this is a hard situation, and the artists are in like pins on nail because they do not find more solutions to this crisis. Many organizations depend on public resources that are not available. Also, the association in Colombia is really fragile, in most of the countries of South America, because the dialogue between the sectors hasn't happened yet. It needs to happen in conditions of solidarity and intelligence to generate conscience and acts to strengthen everyone and to strengthen the sector, because the music sector is quite weak right now. I mean, that's one of the things that we have that has been exposed right now. That, yeah, we do have great music, we do have great arts, we do have great bands that are going all of the world right now. Many of you know the kind of artists that we have, but there's no, I mean, inside our country, sadly, we don't have enough solutions for them. So the panorama is really black, is really bad for everybody right now. I mean, of course, artists are being creative, they are making new songs, they are you know, doing collaborations between each others, and they're doing webinars all the time and talks between them. But as I was telling you before, no one is getting money because of this. There's no places to play. We are closed in the air borders, air and earth borders, every town. So we can't go through the country by now. So, you know, no festivals. Every public event is canceled. I think from June we will have permission for doing 50 people perhaps event. And some collectives and organizations and managers from the, you know, from the independents, they have come together to develop and publish concrete proposals to invite the government to increase resources available to the sector, so more projects can be developed. But still, as I was telling you, the panorama is not clear. The sector is struggling with a lot of difficulties, and we are in the road of learning about this, definitely, because like Glenn said, I think it's day by day. You know, today something happens, tomorrow everything can change, and after tomorrow again. And this is a huge challenge for all of us. I think it's a worldwide challenge because the industry was not ready, the countries are not ready. So yeah, we are demanding this to the government, but the government wasn't ready either. And you know, all the social problems that we have in Colombia. So it's not only the musicians that are going through hunger. It's like many other people in Colombia, because we are a poor country. That's the truth. So yeah, I hope that through these days, you know, with going together and working together, we can at least find some solutions for the short time, for the short periods. And from Circular, of course, we are trying to do our best to help some of the artists, but the only way that we can find, because we are also independent, we are also an organization, non-profit organization. And what we have done until now is that we have this space in our website to support with information to all the artists, where we can see that there are, you know, resources of foundations that they can participate to get some money for digital projects. Or we just made a 50 songs playlist of independent musicians to, you know, to rotate around the world. I encourage you guys from your platforms to share this. I will share it on the chat later. And we have created a document. Octavio, our director, created a document as well with some ideas to invite the sector to come together and to work in these difficulties and in these disadvantages that are more exposed right now. It's not that we didn't have them before, you know. It's like right now, it's like, okay, we just didn't pay attention to these things that were not working. Right now is even harder for us because we were not aware of these. We were not putting a step on that we really need to get associatives. We really need to get someone in the politics to fight for our laws. And we need to be more proactive, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Carolina. I think what you just said there is perfect, as in, like when I said in relation to Australia, that Support Act already existed. So as much as you don't want to have to tap into that resource because it only can mean times are bad, it was a better place to go from than from beginning to explain what your industry is to the government, you know? And I'm actually going to talk very briefly about the current situation in Ireland before I introduce Sam to talk about the UK state of play from both industry and artist side. And in Ireland, you know, the response has been really powerful from the artist side. Culture Island, who I know a lot of you guys would know those guys too. They did that partnership with Facebook, which was the same incentive that the National Arts Centre set up in Canada, and that's been going brilliant. And it, you know, it piloted at the start of the lockdown to provide like a one-off payment for a performance. It's a drop in the ocean though to what the artists will need to weather this full storm. The Irish Arts Council, they opened a special work made during COVID grant, and it's brilliant. You know, I think it's now closed, and people who applied and who are successful, they've got the rest of the year to actually show the work, but it still was a very quick pivot being the word of the month. But and that's in place. And IMRO, who Jen would be the Irish, you know, SOCAN, as you know, and IRMA and the FMC, along with Spotify, launched a relief package for artists only, to receive a one-off payment. And to date, we don't have anything like Support Act or Unison in Canada that covers many roles in the industry, from live production crews, music venues, publicists, managers, agents. And that's a vital end of the sector that is badly in need of support moving forward. I know there's conversations taking place, but it will need a huge amount of government support in Ireland, and understanding of how all of those roles really make it tick, you know, and that they need to be supported, because the artists can go online now and stream, although a lot of them it's learning a whole new tool, and some of them are just highly allergic. But the industry can't do that. And as we all have acknowledged, we'll be the last to go back online, especially the industry. So it's not grim from the artist end in Ireland. It's definitely, people are working at it every day, but we have a long way to go to support the global industry here for sure. Sam, who is coming to us from the forest in the UK, which I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit more about exactly where he is used to sit on the board of directors for Folk Alliance, a stunning artist, and has his Nest Collective. And I just want you to initially talk, Sam, to some of the British Arts Council initiatives that are coming out the ways. And I know that you've shared some information with me about from the PRS and the Musicians Union. So if we could go from there first, that would be brilliant.
Thank you for reminding me to unmute my microphone. Us musicians, singers don't usually have to do that. Yeah, the situation in the UK has been that there's been quite a brilliant turnaround response from some of the main funding bodies. I think the three big ones to make note of are the Arts Council England, who are the main funders of arts venues and practitioners and projects, and infrastructure in the UK. Also the PRS and PRSF, the Performing Rights Society, and their foundation that are the equivalent to America's ASCAP, is that right? And the collecting body, and also a very, very long-standing charity was called the Musicians Benevolent Fund, Help Musicians UK, now known as, which has amassed an enormous granting scheme for any musician to apply. It's usually for musicians who've fallen on hard times at some point in their career, and now everybody is eligible ultimately. The Arts Council put forward two deadlines. I think one of them might be today or tomorrow. The second one might be today or tomorrow. There were very quick turnarounds, both for artists and organisations. As emergency funding, they put together, I think, about 20 million from both turning around a lot of the previous funds for ongoing over the next 4 years, and also digging deep into their reserves. Basically, all money they had in reserve, they are making eligible for this situation, to try and get artists through the next number of months. Now, the issue that we're having in the UK is that, like everywhere in the world, that we haven't as yet got any sort of exit plan for the virus, about what society's change and lockdown is. And the government made a very interesting comment on Monday, where they were very light on information about what the trajectory of lockdown, quarantine and social distancing would be. But arts organisations at the moment are looking at basically very little activity for the rest of the year. Festivals very unlikely to be running until the July 21. That we think that's going to be the impact for some of the major festivals. We're uncertain of whether Glastonbury will happen next year as well. Many of the big arts institutions are really struggling, because actually the grant funding that came up will see us through for the next wee while, but the government said we simply don't know how long we can support the country, and on an individual basis. The arts at the moment is struggling a huge amount. Artists are struggling a huge amount because most of us work on a self-employed basis, and the eligibility for funding was very late to come from the government, and grants will only come from June from the government, which leaves a lot of artists in a very, very vulnerable position, that we simply don't have access to funds. There's been an amazing fundraising response, but at the moment there's been an even bigger fundraising response for the NHS, which is our National Health Service, and of which is really important right now, much more important in many ways, saving lives. But I know many artists are uncertain of what their trajectory will be, with venues looking to be closed for a long time, and lots of the major venues uncertain of how they will be able to operate. I'm hearing from some of the big institutions, intel from inside, that with closure of concessions and restaurants, which is where the bulk of their revenue comes from, that we are all about to go into a process of hibernation, or in a process of hibernation, as we're going through a furloughing process, which is the UK circumstance where businesses if they have employees on PAYE, they are able to claim 80% from the government. However, most of the arts runs on self-employed basis, so artists simply don't have any fallback. We can't just go on holiday and leave. So it's a very complicated situation, and everyone's looking at alternative fundraising measures and alternative income streams. But there's a precariousness to where we're at right now, and an uncertainty of what, like everyone, that we won't have venues to go back and play, and how will the arts have to exist in a post-COVID landscape. And what we don't have is any idea of what the legal circumstances of human gathering will be. I'm out in the forest right now because I'm running the live broadcasting equivalents to what would have been a 6-week residency in a forest, of concerts here in the woods, the glorious sunny woods that we have right now. We've had a month of bright sunshine, and today it starts raining. And usually I do concerts throughout the summer outdoors around campfires. This one is part of a conservation project, musical communions with the nightingale, a very rare bird here, incredible singer that sings at night. And we're turning as much of our content digital, and every organization is scrabbling to work out how to repackage and repurpose a lot of their arts programming. That's a very complicated thing when every artist is trying to do it alongside venues, and I'm certainly aware as a promoter how difficult it is to maintain the commitment of an audience where the whole landscape of every artist is a producer, is a promoter, is their own entity, and looking at some incredibly successful arrivals of artists who have gained enormous followings, of how on a one-man or woman band equivalent to an organization that has a staff team, about that struggle of maintaining employing a team to deliver a program, alternative program round. It's an immensely by the seat of our pants situation right now.
Yeah.
I'm rambling on here, so Sheena, do interject.
No, not at all. I mean, this is exactly what we wanted to hear. Do you feel, and I don't know how much you can talk to this, but do you feel that as much as there's all of the great incentives that you've listed off between PRS and the Arts Council, that there's that the small venues, the smaller promoters, that's also being even looked after, even if it's just by way of a conversational state right now? Like, are people also acknowledging that some of these smaller venues and promoters just might not make it through?
Well, or the other way around. So I'm purely speaking from opinion here. I had our board meeting for the Nest Collective last night, of which we had board members who many of whom work in bigger institutions and organisations, able to reveal a little bit more insight into some of their establishments. And what it's like at the moment, and I speak metaphorically and literally, is that it's like a massive storm has come through the arts forest right now. And some of those big trees that are very brittle, strong and established and well rooted have been torn up. And for them to re-establish and get those engines working is highly complex when you've got a staff team who are furloughed or who may have been made redundant or unemployed, as the likelihood might be of trying to re-amass a large team. For an organisation like myself, we have 8 of us. It's relatively small. It's relatively big by other organisations, but we're nimble and small, and we're able to respond quickly, as we have done, to create a digital programme. Our Nestflix, the Nest Collective, has now become the Nestflix series.
I love that.
And because we're a kind of young tree in the forest, we're able to bend and move and respond a little bit quicker and be a little bit, able to, our agility to respond to what the criteria of what we're allowed to do as best as we can. We're very fortunate that we do a lot of work that's connecting with nature, and the attention to the natural world at the moment has been enormous in the UK. The awareness of the reclaiming of nature into the urban spaces, and how much time and space we have to pay attention to this most stunning spring that we've had, probably the best spring on record yet, and how wonderful that people have been able to sort of connect in with it. So younger arts organisations and smaller ones are actually in many ways in a healthier place in their resilience, in their youthfulness. And so we don't know what'll happen, of how actually bigger organisations are going to have to start working collaboratively with artists as well as organisations to start looking at new ways of partnering to make art happen. Where a big venue, I was hearing that the Royal Festival Hall, which is one of London's largest indoor venues, if we have social distancing measures, a room that's something like 2,000 or 3,000 seater, they're going to have to scale it down to a 1,200 seater by keeping audiences grouped up within their social distance youth households, and allowing what would be a flexible scaling of ways of keeping audiences apart from each other at the same time being able to preach. There's all these kind of plannings that venues are going through of how they can make their spaces acceptable to the post-viral landscape, or a potentially contagious landscape,
Yeah.
and actually trying to create setups within venues that actually enables a way of being that may not change for many years in terms of like the risks that we put ourselves at.
Yeah. Really quick last
Yes.
question, because I do have to move on to Jen, but it's kind of a good segue. From the like PRS point of view, like, are you getting any support as a writer in relation to trying to create new work out of this time, and are they supporting you, like their artist relations people, or is that connect not there yet?
Can I just understand that question correctly? Is that are we still receiving the sort of royalties, or
well,
therefore
yeah,
funding?
well, I presume that you would be, but are they going like the extra mile? Are they trying to create new opportunity? Do you know?
Many big grant schemes have come through, particularly from PRS Foundation, an application, and they were very quick to respond to that, and they made a lot of funds eligible. There are issues with that, and I will be vocal in my criticism that you had to receive over £500 in royalties from the society, which meant the eligibility. So I was eligible as an artist because I was over that threshold. I was unsuccessful in my application, so I didn't receive any money, and that was only maybe a £5,000 grant that people. But actually, for the majority of artists whose music is not being generating huge royalties, that denied them access
They were
from that
out of it.
grant.
Yeah.
And I was actually very upset because there's a huge number of grassroots artists that I, as a folk acoustic musician and promoter, am loyal to, that feel that was quite an unjust criteria.
I hear you. Okay, thanks, Sam. And that is
no,
I know, and I think everything is a work in progress. But it is a perfect segue to introduce Jen, who I know was vocal in getting the SOCAN emergency fund up and running. And thank you, Jen, for being here. It'd be great if you could talk a little bit to how you set that up and what the rules and regulations were around it. It's my understanding it's open to anyone, no matter where you are in your earnings. Is that correct?
Yes and no, and hello, everyone. And actually, Sam put a finger on something that we also had to deal with. This is money that it's not government money, right? It's writers and publishers' money, and so we have to try and be as fair as possible in doing whatever relief we do. And so what we chose to do is to accelerate a program that always existed, which is an advance program. So you can actually call in and say, is there money for me in the timeline that's coming up? Because that's how royalties work, right? Is there money coming up for me? And if so, can I get it now? And so an advance in real world. And what we did is we decided the advances that we would pay out to rights owners as of COVID would not run or would be interest free. So if it takes 3 years to recoup whatever we paid out, then there is no interest. So it's kind of a interest-free loan on your own money. And we get that that's limited, but our biggest concern is that in royalty world, the hit will come later. And so right now, and that's the good news for, I'm sure PRS, as you said, Sheena, will distribute. We also will be distributing in a very regular kind of way on May 15th, sending checks. An average of about 33,000 checks will be, that's usually what goes out every distribution. So that's what will happen on May 15th. And so that keeps going. But as we collect less money, then we will distribute less money down the road. So we were weary of that and making sure that we wouldn't tap into money that we wouldn't have later on. So that's where our relief fund went very softly, if I could put it that way. The one thing that we did do, and this is about advocacy, is we made sure that royalties, we went to the Canadian government with all of the collectives in Canada, and this, I was spearheading that, and I'm quite proud that we finally got the government to accept that royalties were not to be taken into consideration for to disqualify you from getting emergency funds from the government. And so the program that we have in Canada, which you probably will all be jealous, I'm sorry, but is, so not just artists, but any employee and self-employed person in Canada that has seen their revenue go down because of COVID can apply for a $2,000 a month grant or payout by the federal government. And we were worried because one of the conditions was you would be eligible so long as you didn't have revenue, or, and then eventually they opened up to, you can have up to $1,000 revenue per month and still get $2,000 from government. If we were to send money to members and have them disqualify from the Canadian Emergency Relief Benefit, that would have been kind of counterproductive. And so they decided they would actually treat royalties as old earned money, basically. And so you're getting it now, but it's on work that you did previously. And so we preserved the $2,000 per month for our members and members of every collective. So it wasn't just music, it was music, pictorial art, books. All of the collectives got together, wrote to the government, and actually made sure that that was the case and that royalties would be treated differently. We're quite lucky in Canada that actually we heard our Prime Minister on TV. He does a daily update for press, and he actually said on television, artists are the ones that are keeping up with, they're keeping us up. We need to keep them up, and actually restated how culture was important and all of that. So that, I think, helped a lot. And I guess this to say that money isn't everything. Sometimes respect and recognition of what you're doing also helps in making these days, these odd days and strange days, a little better. I wanted, you spoke of the Facebook and NAC thing, which is their program is called Canada Performs, or Canada en Prestation. And what they did is they asked the National Arts Centre in Ottawa to program a series where Facebook would put money for these performances, and the performers would get $1,000 for each performance. So, and they asked the National Arts Centre, yes, it's a government-owned arts center, but it's also a multidisciplinary, does that work? Presenters, so they have dance and they have ballet and classical and folk and chanson. They have all the different genres, so it made sure that money was going to a bunch of different stuff. One of the things, and I want to, because I think we don't have much more time, but I wanted to talk about one thing that actually happened that I thought was really cool. The Quebec government, so Quebec being the Francophone province of Canada, and that's where I'm from and where I sit and work. The government started an initiative called Panier Bleu, which blue is the color of our province. So Panier Bleu was basically meant buy local, but they started a website where they concentrated links to different local organizations, businesses, and factory, whatever, so that you would buy local. And the day that they announced that, one of our members, Philemon Simon, started saying, yeah, but what about music? And so he started a hashtag called Musique Bleue, Blue Music, and please start listening to music from here, and started calling out on radios, could you please start playing a little more of the local music made here and that type of thing. And during the week that followed that, the Premier's office actually asked all of the music collectives if it was possible to license music from Quebec to feed the Facebook feed of the daily updates of the premiere. So if you go on Facebook 15 minutes before he starts talking to all of the media and press, there's actually music from Quebec playing, and they put the name of the artist, the title of the song, and the hashtag blue music or musique bleu. And so that was part of, again, something that like we helped facilitate, and I thought was really cool because all of the collectives said, we need to do this. We need to make it, we need for the message or a positive message to go through. And of course, as Sam pointed out, and most pointed out, you know, people are trying to find ideas to go back to live venues and all of that. And I have to say that our governments have been very proactive in trying to find ideas. They know that, you know, they don't know how this works. And so I've been on phone calls with most government bodies, whether they be Ontario, Quebec, or federal, and where public health authorities have been on the call and they're asking questions and what would be the challenges that you see. And so we're trying to find ways to keep especially the live industry alive. And the idea that we heard the most, and I'm sure you guys have, is with distanciation in the live venue, also having a stream coming from that live venue. And that's one thing that we've seen appear, and I don't know if in other territories that happens, but it used to be everyone's alone on their guitar or their piano and just Facebook Live type thing. And now we're seeing concert type events coming up and actually paying gigs. So you need to buy tickets to get the Zoom link or get into the room. So at SOCAN, we also are aware that there's a new concert type of concert, online type of concert, and we'll have to look into that to see how do we distribute the money that comes from that, and how do we follow that, and how do you declare a concert that you made online and that type of thing, whereas before you needed to have tickets and needed. So anyway, we're, you know, it is moving a lot, but I have to say that we're very fortunate in Canada that we have both our levels of government, I mean, provincial and federal, are very aware and very weary of artists and culture, and that makes for a big difference, I think.
Big time. Big time. I mean, yes, I was on a meeting call the other night. It was all Americans, myself and a colleague in Canada. And at the end of it, she's like, it's okay, you can all move into my house. I've enough room.
There you go.
But I'm going to ask a quick question to you, Jen, that then I'm going to see and I would love everyone to give like a 1 minute response, which is, I know that APRA down in Australia, and they've been running this for years, Glenn, the Song Hubs program, which I know they've pivoted to online in recent times. And if you're not familiar with the Song Hubs, it's basically like developing artists put with music artists, producers, and more established artists to create new work, upskill, all the rest of it. And if there's one thing I think that we can do across borders right now in particular is generate work now that is revenue down the road. And I wonder, are SOCAN, do they have any incentives like that right now for their artists, or is that in the
So no, we actually had a program called Song Camp Mondays, which we used to do physically. So we would partner or pair up writers that didn't know each other in studios that we have in Los Angeles, Toronto, Montreal, and now we're doing it online and helping them connect and create. And the next generation of Song Camp Mondays will be with more established producers, trying to get, you know, if their studios are not working, then maybe we can actually have them try something and you know, risk into, you're not having a session anyway, why not try this brand new small tree that can win rather than the bigger trees.
Right? On the tree house.
Yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
So yes, we are doing that. And we're trying to find a way to do our song camps that we used to do. Obviously, they need a lot of being together in the same room type thing to see how virtually we can do it with online versions of that. And yeah, that's also in the work. And I forgot to mention that the SOCAN Foundation is also looking at a program on grants that they're still not ready to put out there, but that's also going to come up. So
that's great. That's great. And Sam, is there anything that you're aware of coming out of the UK like that, from a more rider, like producing new works cross borders at this time?
There's been I'm going to speak about actually the community singing aspect. There's been a real rise in choirs, even though the choir technology is still not possible. As I'm sure everyone's finding it impossible to do in-sync stuff, but my choir and many other choirs are now working on a much different platform and have international audiences singing along with hundreds of other singers, and it's been really incredible seeing how the international community is evolving in that respect on a real kind of on the home by home level, and professional musicians. Brilliant. And there's been a real coming together. Yeah, so that's been really inspiring to see.
Brilliant, brilliant. And Carolina, do you think that there's something that is currently happening or that could come out of your community in relation to Colombian artists and writers like working across borders as well?
There are some things that they're doing on the independent, like works from the artist, but it's not a government initiative. There is the Bogota's mayor, the government of Bogota recently launched a public call for work around music. I mean, to create the digital content for these days, but they are not encouraging to exchange and to do cross borders content between musicians and artists. But definitely in Circular this year, we will encourage that, because we will continue with our event from the 12th of November. It won't be presential, we think. I mean, no one will be able to work through those days, but definitely we will do exchange between producers and musicians and artists between Latin America and Colombia, that in a way that we can, connect or continue the connection that we have with the Latin American community.
Nice, brilliant. And Glennie, I know you're very familiar with the Song Hubs model, but is there anything else coming up or in conversation that you think can be audience development outside of Australia while staying at home?
Well, I think the artists are probably getting together themselves. I mean, obviously APRA is still doing their Song Hubs, and they've kind of transitioned that to kind of an online medium. And then everyone's using Zoom as well now, and a lot of producers that I know have been using Zoom for a long time, and now they're bringing in other writers. So as more writers become more familiar with Zoom, the writing projects are happening. And then Francesca de Valance, who was at Focal Lines this year, she's got her I Heart Songwriting Club, which is probably a perfect thing for people to not only get involved in from a songwriting perspective, but even if you're not really a songwriter, you can still join that as a mental health kind of benefit as well. So I Heart Songwriting Club is another good one that people could get involved in.
Brilliant.
Maybe we can start doing it. That's the next export, is having Australian songwriters with Canadians or Colombian or UK. Absolutely. I mean, that'd be great.
No, I think that'd be awesome. Totally. With that, and even I know we'll finish on this, but we have an Irish artist here that did a co-write last week, Glenn, with a gorgeous Australian artist, Liz Stringer. Some of you guys might know her. And now he's going to open for her on her Australian YouTube show next week, and we'll do a vice versa. So, I mean, they're small things, right? But I do think there's a way for people to discover these artists across the board as well. We're all input.
There's a lot of that happening. Can I ask a quick question? If the writers from around the world are doing writing with Canadian artists and they get recorded, then that actually helps for them to get played on Canadian radio too, right?
It can, yes.
Yep.
I'm so sorry to
Canada,
interrupt
country,
everyone,
country.
but we have come to the end of our time together today. Thank you for joining us for this webinar presented by Focal Alliance International. A huge thank you to our wonderful panelists, Sheena Keane from Ireland, Glenn Dickie in Australia, Carolina Rojas in Colombia, gracias Carolina, Sam Lee in the UK, Geneviève Côté au Quebec, merci Geneviève. This webinar will be made available as a recording on the Focal Alliance International YouTube channel. And please do take a moment to fill out our webinar survey today so we can program webinars that you want to see. Stay safe and connected, community, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Good night.
Merci, gracias.
Gracias.